People today, looking back on the 3 zombie films, I think that there are really split camps. And there are some people that you can't get them away from the first film. You know, that's their love. And there are some people that just sort of celebrate and party with Dawn of the Dead. It's sort of the wildest of the 3. It was also the most popular. And then there are the real trolls, you know, like Day of the Dead. I had this, after doing Dawn of the Dead, I had this realization that, gee, one was the late 60s, and this was the late 70s. And I suddenly got this conceit about, well, maybe I'll do one of these every 10 years and try to, reflect a little bit of what's going on. So Day of the Dead really grew out of that 80s, I was giving up on everything, government, the military, the faith in, financial systems, and everything was just starting to look, geez, man, what we've been building up, house of cards here. Originally, I wrote Day of the Dead as bigger. It would have cost about $6 or $7 million.
The original script for Day of the Dead was a phone book. It was Raiders. It was Ben-Hur with zombies in it. I mean, it was a major effects film.
All of the stuff that's in the existing Day of the Dead, but there was also an above-ground encampment.
A group of people who had fortified themselves against the zombies created a camp with the society kind of crumbling both physically and morally.
It had some outdoor action sequences and some chase stuff.
The script, I remember sitting on my couch in my parents' basement, reading that script and just being floored by it. I loved that script so much, and I just thought, man, this is going to be the coolest zombie film ever made.
George was very lucky. He's got this great team around him, and they all grew up as amateur filmmakers on Night of the Living Dead. Tom Savini, Mike Gore, Cletus Anderson, all part of the team. My job was to, I guess, go around with the oil can and keep the wheels turning,
In those days, it was a family business, and it was always, everybody did whatever was necessary. And, my slot was just assistant director because I was always with George, and I learned a lot.
I would say for the first 2 months or month and a half, we began building based on the original script.
There was an underground laboratories. There was also an above-ground encampment, and there were corrals where they kept the zombies.
Then they had legions of soldier zombies.
It would have involved more extras, it would have involved more effects, it would have involved more crew, cameras.
It became clear that the resources were not at hand to include all of that.
Just played it for what it was. It was just a send-up, really,
I didn't know George personally. I had met him when I was like, let's see, in the 8th grade when Night of the Living Dead premiered. And my father was actually in the original Night of the Living Dead. He played himself, Chilly Billy. He was a television host in the 60s. And I was living in New York at the time, and I was doing a play called Reckless. George was in the audience. We sort of rekindled all of our connections. There's this connection that Pittsburgh people have, and he enjoyed my performance and saw me as the character of Sarah. So that's how it worked out.
George is doing another picture, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, maybe I could play like a zombie or something. And they called, and it was, yeah, George wants to read for Rhodes. And I'm like, huh? And I went in and I auditioned and kept my fingers crossed, and I got the role. I was like, this is good. This is good.
George Romero was at the audition, and he gave me some directions, and I did them. It was mostly dumb show. Bub doesn't really have any lines. It was entirely an improvisation. And I did my zombie thing, and I got the job. Bub was sort of the mascot of the shoot, and I really sensed that all the people on the other side of the camera were rooting for me, and that was a real nice thing.
When George did the rewrite, he really based the entire thing on the Wampa Mine facility, this huge underground storage facility.
I found the location before I completed writing the script. It's an existing limestone mine in the hills outside of Pittsburgh. People store yachts down there. Old Hollywood negatives are down there, valuable papers of all kinds.
And there were miles of lakes in the back of this place. And it was dark, and there were these little light bulbs hanging.
It was easy to get lost in there, lots of corridors going in lots of different directions.
It was pretty scary, out there.
Every once in a while, bats would fly around and stuff.
Your voice would just bounce off the wall.
It turned out to be a really good location. Then you start setting up for whatever we were going to do that day. We were always working simultaneously in terms of preparing and shooting.
So you'd be down there working for hours and hours. It was really, and we worked all the time. That's all we did, At
some points it was really boring in there, and you couldn't go out. There's nowhere to go, It's just another wall staring at you. It's like being imprisoned in a way.
And we would spend the whole day there, sometimes till 11 o'clock at night. And then we would go back.
Take a shower, get the makeup off.
Sleep a little bit, wake up. And so we really did not see daylight for a long time.
It was cold down there. They kept it, I think, at 55 degrees.
There was this ongoing limestone dust that would just linger in the air,
And when you blew your nose or coughed, there's black dust in your handkerchief.
And it's like, phew, you're a mess underneath that makeup.
But of course,
Something hopeful in that image. The makeup process was very, 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 very long. Day after day after day for a month. It took between 3 and 4 hours to get it on. I flew to Pittsburgh, or I think outside of Pittsburgh, where Tom Savini lived. And in his workshop, he made a plaster mask of my face. And then they sculpted onto that Bub's face, and then they made many, many, many copies of that in a latex mold, so that what they applied to my face perfectly fit my face on the inside, and it was Bub's face on the outside. They also gave me a new set of teeth. The genius of the design and of the material is that it behaves very much like skin. Actually wearing the makeup for long periods of time didn't bother me. What really bothered me was getting it off. And it seemed it took about another hour and a half. And also the adhesive remover, I had a kind of an allergic reaction to it. After a couple of weeks, I looked like I had the advanced stages of syphilis, and everything was breaking out and red and cracking, and it was pretty painful.
They were given $1 and a bat hat and a newspaper signed "Stay Scared, George."
And I wouldn't do it for $1 million. Because you got to sit around in all this goop for hours and hours and hours. I think it's miserable, but people enjoy it. And they wear the makeup home. All the local restaurants and McDonald's in the area were reporting dead people walking in and ordering cheeseburgers.
So there was like 4 different levels of zombies. And ultimately, there's such a dramatic difference between those zombies.
I hired a guy, Terry Prince, to manufacture zombie masks. And these were going to be for the background zombies, the zombies that were very far away.
We had, I think, 70 or 100 of those made.
And the costume department, Barbara Anderson, would create their own zombies with hair colors and streaking tips and some fake blood and stuff, cereal,
And you'd walk along this line and they'd just spray you with all these colours, so you're all green and black and mottled and what have you.
Those were like the extra zombies. Then we had our hero extras, which would be people that would come in that would get appliances glued to them. And then we had the The sort of featured zombies.
The ones that were going to be right in front of the camera. I had 6, 8 guys doing an assembly line of prosthetic makeups on zombies.
And they really enjoyed the process of having the prosthesis put on their face. And a lot of them were local actors from Pittsburgh. They took their characters very seriously.
George would step out front and say, now look, this is the way, zombies walk. And he would demonstrate this slow, kind of like, George is a big guy and he kind of walks a little bit like a zombie himself. I had never seen so many uninhibited people in my life. I was stunned. People would do anything.
When we were making those sort of loose, free and easy movies where we were really running the show, it was fun. And the process should be fun, but I think that the best results come from having a chilled out, a decent working environment and sort of a friendly place.
George is a terrific director. He gives the actors a lot of freedom.
I appreciated the fact that he gave me the time to develop things. Very often, the first time something is plausible and there's not a boom shadow in it, they want to move on, and that was not the case in working with George. I'd do a take and he would be happy with it, and I'd have another idea and we'd try it again.
He wants you to contribute. I would go off and sketch things or provide him with some visual information and say, this is what I'm thinking of, and he would say, yeah.
George would be writing the script in Florida, and I'd call him and say, how about if we take a shovel and drive it through a zombie's face and pop out the top of his head? Okay, he writes it in the script.
George always deferred to Tom to pull off the gags. Tom designed all of those shots. George would go, okay, Tom, so tell me how this works. Tell me where I shoot it, what's the best way to put the camera, and that's really unheard of. That level of freedom really allows you to make sure that the effects work to their maximum potential. And a movie like Day of the Dead, they did. I mean, there's not one bad effect in that movie. Day of the Dead was really the culmination of Tom's career.
I think he was really dedicated to trying to make these effects look better than anything that he had done before.
Dawn of the Dead, Friday the 13th, Maniac, Prowler of the Burning, there was a whole slew. I was going from one splatter film to the next, and I learned a lot more doing all those films.
Day of the Dead was really the first time where Tom really hired top-notch sculptors to come in. Tom had a big crew behind him. I mean, on all the other films that he had done, he had 1, maybe 2 guys with him.
We had a huge workshop. We began Day of the Dead at my house with 6 guys in my house on the back porch, creating hundreds of small, medium, and large zombie appliances.
Everything that could mix and match.
So if you were to walk on the set to be a zombie, we'd look at you and say, okay, you're a medium, or throw these appliances on you. And we would do that to hundreds of zombies. You're down there, it's Halloween again, every day is Halloween. So you're Dr. Frankenstein, you're the monster. So you're doing that constantly, and that's a lot of fun.
When you wanted to get away and hang out and just get away, you went in the shop with the boys, because that's where the good music was, and pretty PAs would be in there, and that's where you'd go.
I would always hear them laughing.
And then kids would want to come in to Tom's workshop in the mines.
A whole bunch of new guys who saw Dawn of the Dead and went, that's what I want to do for a living.
So people would come willingly to help out, and they'd sweep the floor and they'd make tea or coffee and just watch, so that they could learn how to make these weird faces and heads and bullet hits.
In the story, the mad scientist is experimenting with brain tissue. So we just would buy a dozen or so brains and have them thinly sliced so that you can put them under a microscope and look at them.
We purchased a bunch of skeletons from Carolina Biological and started dressing them with like latex and cotton and stuff to dress them. We even sculpted heads that went on top of those skeletons just for dressing. We knew we were going to need rotted corpses. But
it seemed so eerie to be able to do this. I mean, to buy body parts and they were so readily available.
Arises, and that's the whole effect,
Anytime you hear Tom talking about effects or you see interviews with him, he's always talking about misdirection.
Your mindset needs to be, what do I need to see to make me believe The trick, the magic trick. What do I need to see to make me believe that what I'm seeing is really happening?
The corpses on the table in Logan's lab. And that was, again, Tom just saying, oh, we cut a hole in the table and we tilt the actor's head back. And then we close it up and you put the appliance there.
Dick Smith, the greatest living makeup artist today, my idol, my hero, the god of makeup, asked me, where the hell is that guy's head? You know, I fooled him. There were two characters that had guts spilling out of them in Day of the Dead. The zombie on the table. That was Mike Tursick, one of my assistants. What we did was we put his body in a hole. And all we did was sculpt a skeletal chest on him with a cavern for the stomach area. And we filled the cavity with intestines, pig intestines from a slaughterhouse. We had a 5-gallon drum of intestines we'd use over and over again. We also sculpted a flap of realistic chest, pectoral muscles, nipple kind of hair in the chest thing to go on top of that skeleton. And we attached hemostats to it so that when he turned, the weight of the hemostats would pull the flesh down. We actually had one long rubber intestine that we wrapped the real intestines around so that when the intestines slid down this thing and fell out, that this little thing would be dangling out of there. You know, it's sick, but you know, that's you got to think of these things. So then, of course, we did it to Miguel as well. Greg Nicotero was gut boy. He was in charge of the intestines, you know. Now he's got his own company, and he's a millionaire.
And I took the real guts and I wrapped them around the polyfoam guts that were glued to the inside of the appliance. So when he gets up, the guts sort of unravel from the other fake intestines and hit the ground. It was pretty gross. It was good.
So the intestines go back in the refrigerator because we're using the same intestines. We also use the same intestines in Joe Pilato's when they tear Joe Pilato in half.
I didn't realize it would be such a lousy day to die. They had the false floor, and there's this little hole. So I crawl into the hole, put the false torso over me. It's got the hole in it. All right, let's get the guts. Well, the guts had been stored in a refrigerator.
While we're gone, somebody unplugs our refrigerator.
Supposedly, accidentally.
For 2 weeks. You can imagine when we got back what it smelled like in that shop. It was worse than an autopsy. It was worse than you can imagine. But we had to use them because we were doing the effect.
So they bring on the guts, and it's like, I'd never smelled a dead body before, but this was bad.
All the zombies they had wax and, you know, and I had a respirator on with English leather all over, you know, just something.
They're spraying cologne and there's stuff in the guts.
Poor Joe Pilato. I mean, you can't imagine the stench.
That was covered with blood, it was covered with guts. It was just a mess. So once they covered it, and then they put the shirt on and everything, and
A refreshing outdoor experience.
It was a whole different feeling. And then we had to go back in the dark to this mine. Well, there were times where we were so silly and punchy. There was one time I could not get a line because I kept laughing.
Action!
I think we had lost our minds at that point.
Over the period of 12, 14, 16 weeks, 4 months in that mine, people were dropping like flies. You know.
I was sick as a dog. I was off the shoot for, I think, 3 or 4 days.
I had a temperature of 104 degrees.
George got pretty sick at the end of that shoot.
And you know, when you're that sick, you feel like you're really out of it. And, oh, I was out of it.
We called in this local GP, local doctor, and
He come into the set with his bag.
39 of the crew were seen by this guy.
He was giving people B12 like it was candy.
Hit it. Go.
Sometimes everybody would be in a really bad mood because we were exhausted. But that was really pretty rare. It was very rare. Being on the set of Day of the Dead is like being with your brothers and sisters.
There was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of support between departments.
I have very warm, good feelings, despite all the blood and guts.
We just spent so much time together, just drinking beer and laughing and watching movies.
We were all 20 years old and drinking our asses off and having too much fun that we didn't care. We didn't care. We were working on Day of the Dead.
Now, George A. Romero takes us out of the night, beyond the dawn, and into the darkest day of horror the world has ever known. Day of the Dead.
I believe it grossed its budget in its first weekend, in its opening weekend in New York State alone. It was received well by those people that had an interest in that type of movie. No one has splattered like this before. This is like serious splatterage, you know.
And I went into this Times Square theater. It was very interesting watching the movie because the audience got very excited, particularly when Bub came on the screen. The audience spontaneously broke into a chant. They were going, Bub, 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 Bub.
But I think it was disappointing at the box office. I think people expected another sort of Dawn of the Dead, a great big bawdy, you know, adventure comic book type thing.
But of course that never came.
To this day, which is 18 years later, I get fan mail at my house.
I've gotten emails and I've gotten letters and I've had visits from people.
I was in a 7-Eleven and buying something, and dude, are you Rhodes? You know, the guy behind. I was like, yeah. Wow, you know, man, hey.
And the guy checking us in, you know, looked at it and said, George Romero, are you the George Romero? And the guy, and you know, George said, well, I do make those horror movies. And he goes, oh my God. But it was so funny, you know, like in the middle of nowhere, you know.
It's almost like, you know, they expect us to do this again. I mean, to me, it's fitting. I mean, I can't tell you how many emails I get. Are you going to do George's next film? It's like we become Abbott and Costello, you know, of the genre.
Well, I hesitate to say anything about, first of all, I can say that if I do another one, I don't think it's going to be called Twilight of the Dead. At the moment, my title is Dead Reckoning.
Why not? You know, sure. I'd do the effects on that.
We're talking to a major studio about it.
Has to be unique, has to be different. You got to, again, outdo what we've done in Dawn and Day, even though many years have gone by.
Who knows? You can never tell.